morning sun was just beginning to climb over the distant hills, casting a golden light across the military training ground. The air smelled of gunpowder and fresh earth, a mix that the soldiers had grown used to over years of training. But today, there was a tension that no one could ignore. Rows of soldiers stood rigidly at attention, their rifles slung carefully on their shoulders, eyes fixed on the target far in the distance. The target itself was tiny, almost impossible to see without a scope, and it sat 4,000 meters away, an extreme distance even for the army's best marksman. At the center of this tense atmosphere stood the general, a man whose face had been hardened by decades of service. His uniform was crisp, his medals gleaming in the sunlight, but today, even his usual composure seemed strained. The soldiers had already attempted shot after shot, 13 in total, and each one had missed. Not even the most experienced sharpshooters could hit the target. Each failure seemed to sink the mood further, spreading doubt and frustration like wildfire. The general's eyes scanned the line of soldiers, his gaze sharp and commanding. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This wasn't just a practice exercise. It was a test of skill, patience, and focus. The army relied on precision in situations where mistakes could cost lives. Yet, despite the pressure and years of training, the perfect shot remained elusive. His jaw tightened as he considered the failures. 13 misses. 13 opportunities wasted. Each miss was a reminder that even the best soldiers could falter. And in moments like these, experience didn't always guarantee success. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady his mind. Then, in a voice that carried both authority and desperation, he asked the question that had been building inside him. "Any sharpshooters here?" The words were simple, almost casual, but the meaning behind them was powerful. It was not just a question. It was a challenge, an open invitation for someone to step forward and prove that they could do what no one else had managed so far. The line of soldiers shifted nervously. Some stared at their feet, unsure if they were ready for such a test. Others exchanged quick, worried glances with their comrades. They knew the difficulty of the shot, the incredible precision it required. Even a slight miscalculation of wind, angle, or breathing could send the bullet far off course. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to feel like a heavy fog over the range. In the midst of this, one soldier stood out, but not because of experience or reputation. She was quiet, unassuming, and had always been seen as someone who handled routine tasks rather than combat challenges. Her uniform was clean, her posture correct, but there was nothing in her appearance that suggested she could perform the extraordinary. Most of the soldiers barely noticed her at first, assuming that the question was meant for the trained marksman who had been practicing for years. She didn't boast, didn't make a move to call attention to herself. She simply watched, calm and steady, as the general scanned the line, his frustration visible with each passing second. The general's eyes lingered for a moment longer on the soldiers who had tried and failed, then moved across to her. Something in her composure caught his attention. Perhaps it was the calm confidence in her eyes, the steady way she held herself despite the high stakes. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could be the one to succeed where others had failed. But the thought seemed almost impossible. After all, she had never been part of the sharpshooter team, never trained under extreme long-range conditions. She was just a simple woman, as some soldiers quietly whispered among themselves. Still, in that tense silence, the general felt a spark of hope. He had asked, after all, if there were any sharpshooters left, anyone capable of turning failure into success. And now, in the quiet determination of someone overlooked, there was a possibility. The others had tried and missed. Perhaps it was time to see if courage, focus, and quiet skill could defy expectations. As the sun climbed higher, glinting off the rifles lined up on the ground, a sense of anticipation settled over the range. Every soldier was holding their breath, waiting, unsure of what would happen next. The stakes were high, the challenge almost impossible, but the moment was alive with potential. The general knew that whoever stepped forward now would not only face a test of marksmanship but a test of nerve, precision, and heart. No one spoke. The wind whispered gently across the open range, carrying with it the faint scent of tension, dust, and gunpowder. The general's question hung in the air, unanswered, a silent dare to anyone brave enough to take the shot. And in that moment all eyes began to notice her. Not as a mere support staff, not as a bystander, but as someone who might just change the course of the day, and perhaps prove something extraordinary about skill, focus, and the unexpected hero hidden among ordinary people. While the general's question still echoed across the training ground, the soldiers shifted uneasily, unsure who, if anyone, would step forward. The line of sharpshooters looked tense, checking their rifles and scopes, replaying their earlier failures in their minds. 13 attempts had already missed, and the pressure weighed heavily on everyone. The general's sharp gaze swept across the group, searching for someone, anyone, who could succeed where experience had failed. Among all the trained soldiers, standing quietly at the edge of the line, was a woman who hardly seemed like a contender. She was simple in appearance, her uniform neat but unassuming, her hair tied back, no medals or insignias to boast of her rank or skill. She had always been seen as a support staff member, someone who helped maintain the equipment, cleaned the rifles, and assisted in minor tasks. In the eyes of the army, she had always been ordinary, invisible in a crowd of trained and decorated soldiers. Yet, there was a calm determination about her that day that seemed to go unnoticed by most. While the other soldiers fidgeted with their scopes, adjusted their aim, or whispered nervously among themselves, she stood silently, her eyes fixed on the distant target. There was a sense of patience and focus about her, a quiet confidence that suggested she had done this before, even if no one knew it. She didn't boast, didn't speak out, didn't make a show of herself. She simply waited, as if she already understood what needed to be done. The soldiers around her barely noticed at first. Some glanced in her direction with mild curiosity, others with faint amusement. She? Step up? Are you joking? A young soldier whispered to his comrade. Another snickered quietly, shaking his head. The idea that someone so simple could take the shot seemed impossible, almost laughable. They were trained marksmen, handpicked for their precision and experience, and yet they had failed. How could someone who had only been handling rifles in maintenance duties possibly succeed? The general, however, observed her carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her posture, the way she held herself with quiet composure. There was something about the way she prepared herself, her steady breathing, and the calm focus in her eyes that made him pause. Unlike the others who were tense, fidgety, or frustrated from repeated failures, she seemed almost at ease. It was as if the enormity of the challenge did not frighten her, did not weigh her down. She looked confident, not arrogant, not boastful, just ready. The murmurs among the soldiers grew louder, a mixture of doubt and mockery. Why would she even try? She's never been a sharpshooter. This is going to be embarrassing for everyone. Some tried to warn her, thinking they were being kind, but she ignored them completely. Her focus was entirely on the target, her mind already calculating distance, wind, and trajectory. Every detail mattered, and she was taking her time, letting precision guide her rather than panic or expectation. Despite the skepticism of those around her, she quietly moved closer to her rifle. She had prepared her weapon carefully, checking every part, ensuring that nothing could go wrong. Unlike others who had rushed through their shots, anxious to prove themselves, she understood that rushing was the enemy of accuracy. Her hands moved confidently, cleaning the scope, adjusting the elevation, and aligning the sights. Her movements were methodical, practiced, and precise. The general's curiosity grew. He had asked the question, and now, in front of him, was someone quietly answering it. Not with words, but with focus and determination. He could feel the tension in the air shift slightly. The soldiers who had mocked her before now began to glance her way, their faces reflecting surprise and uncertainty. Could this simple woman really pull off what they could not? Could she succeed where 13 trained sharpshooters had failed? As she readied herself, the sun climbed higher, casting shadows across the range. The wind blew lightly, stirring dust and leaves, a subtle reminder of the conditions that would challenge her shot. She adjusted for it naturally, almost instinctively, showing a level of awareness that only comes from experience. The other soldiers watched in stunned silence, realizing that her calmness was not ignorance. It was preparation, skill, and perhaps something more. Then she took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. The target was tiny, far away, and invisible to the naked eye, but she did not flinch. Her eyes locked onto it through the scope, her mind focusing on every variable: distance, wind, gravity, and the slightest movement of her body. The silence around her grew heavier as the soldiers and even the general held their breath, unsure of what to expect. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself had slowed. All the doubts, all the past failures, all the whispers of skepticism faded away, leaving only her rifle, and the distant target. The training ground, which had been filled with tension and frustration, was now filled with anticipation. Everyone waited, knowing that this shot could either shatter expectations or confirm their doubts. And yet, she remained calm, confident, and ready. Unlike the others, who had let pressure and fear influence their aim, she had mastered herself first. The soldiers who had laughed at her began to realize that perhaps they had misjudged her entirely. The general, his eyes fixed on her, knew that something extraordinary was about to happen. In that moment, it was clear. This simple woman, unnoticed and underestimated, might just be the answer to the question he had asked so desperately. The soldiers around her continued to whisper, their doubts growing louder as they watched her move slowly toward the firing line. Some couldn't hide their amusement, shaking their heads at the idea that someone so ordinary could attempt a shot that had already defeated 13 of the army's most skilled sharpshooters. "This is going to be a disaster," one muttered, barely under his breath. Another scoffed, pretending not to watch, but his eyes betrayed him. He was curious, and maybe even a little worried about what might happen. The general, standing at the center of the range with his arms crossed, observed her carefully. He had seen enough in his career to know that appearances could be deceiving, but even he struggled to imagine how someone with no record of sharpshooting success could handle such an extreme challenge. 13 misses had already occurred, each one more frustrating than the last. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, as he considered whether he should allow her to take the shot. Despite the skepticism surrounding her, she moved with calm precision. She approached her rifle, not with hesitation or fear, but with a quiet determination that was almost palpable. Unlike the others who had rushed through their preparation in nervous excitement or frustration, she seemed deliberate in every motion. She adjusted the rifle scope carefully, checked the barrel, and ensured the sight was aligned perfectly. Each step she took showed an understanding of what needed to be done, as if she had performed this action countless times before, even if no one knew it. Some of the soldiers began to mutter quietly among themselves, questioning whether the general would allow her to attempt the shot. "He won't let her," one said. "It's impossible. She'll just embarrass herself." Others were more hesitant, uncertain how to react. They were torn between wanting to see someone succeed and fearing the inevitable failure. Even those who were secretly hoping for a miracle couldn't hide their skepticism. The general finally spoke, his voice cutting through the whispers and tension like a knife. "Step forward if you think you can make it," he commanded, his eyes locking on her. For a moment there was silence. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether the order was meant for her or someone else. But she didn't hesitate. She took a calm, steady step forward, her posture relaxed but confident. Her movements were unhurried, yet every gesture conveyed focus and purpose. The general's brow furrowed as he watched her approach. He had to admit, even to himself, that there was something unusual about the way she carried herself. She didn't act nervous, and she didn't seek attention. She simply walked with the quiet certainty of someone who believed in her own abilities. This was not arrogance, this was pure focus, honed by preparation and skill. The soldiers around her exchanged uneasy glances. Some were still skeptical, whispering doubts about her ability. "She can't possibly do it," one muttered. "We've tried 13 times, and we all failed." Others remained silent, Their curiosity piqued despite themselves. They began to notice her calm hands, the way she adjusted the rifle with care, and the focused look in her eyes. Slowly, the mood shifted from ridicule to intrigue. Perhaps there was more to this simple woman than they had assumed. She knelt by the rifle, taking her position with practiced precision. Her eyes scanned the distant target, estimating the distance, factoring in the wind, and calculating the angle. Unlike the other soldiers who had tried and failed, she didn't let frustration or pressure affect her concentration. Her mind was clear, her breathing steady, and her movements controlled. She understood that a successful shot required more than strength or experience. It required patience, calculation, and absolute focus. The general stepped closer, observing every motion. He had seen many sharpshooters in his career, but there was something about her approach that was different. She wasn't relying on luck, and she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was methodical, calm, and precise. Even in this moment of extreme pressure, she remained composed, a stark contrast to the nervous energy of the soldiers who had failed before her. Some soldiers still whispered doubts, but a few began to feel a spark of hope. If anyone could do it, perhaps she could. They began to notice the subtle signs of skill, the way she adjusted her grip, how she aligned the scope, and the careful way she measured her breathing. Every small action demonstrated awareness and control, qualities that were often overlooked until tested under pressure. Time seemed to slow as she prepared for the shot. The wind rustled across the range, dust lifting gently into the air, carrying with it the scent of earth and gunpowder. She took a deep breath, steadying her body and mind. Her focus was absolute, and in that moment, everything else faded away. The mocking whispers, the doubt, the pressure of the general's gaze. All that remained was her, the rifle, and the distant target. The soldiers who had doubted her were now silent, watching intently. Even the general, who had asked the question with a hint of frustration, found himself holding his breath. He had asked if any sharpshooters were present, and now, before him, stood someone who seemed ready to answer that question in a way no one could have expected. The simple woman, underestimated and overlooked, was about to attempt something extraordinary. She wasn't motivated by pride or the need to prove others wrong. She was driven by focus, skill, and an unwavering belief in her own ability. The soldiers and the general waited in anticipation, realizing that this moment might be the one where expectations are shattered and a new standard of excellence is revealed. The air was thick with tension as the woman knelt by her rifle, preparing for the shot that everyone thought was impossible. The soldiers, who had been mocking her earlier, now watched in stunned silence. Even the general, who had grown used to witnessing incredible feats over decades of service, couldn't hide his curiosity. This was no ordinary moment. It was a test of skill, patience, and nerve, and the quiet, unassuming woman in front of him seemed to hold all three in perfect balance. She didn't rush. Unlike the soldiers who had failed before, who had been tense and anxious, she took her time. She adjusted the scope slowly, turning the dials with precision, aligning it perfectly with the distant target 4,000 meters away. Every motion was deliberate, practiced, and careful. She checked the rifle barrel, the stock, the trigger. Every part of the weapon had to be perfect. A small mistake could ruin the shot, and she knew it. The wind was picking up slightly, rustling the dry grass across the range. Most of the soldiers ignored it, focusing only on pulling the trigger, but she paid attention. She calculated the effect it would have on the bullet, the subtle push it might give mid-flight, and adjusted her aim accordingly. Her mind worked like a machine, measuring angles, distance, gravity, and environmental factors simultaneously. Every detail mattered. Even a tiny miscalculation could send the bullet far off course. As she prepared, she took a deep breath and held it, letting her body settle into a perfect balance. Her hands were steady, her elbows planted firmly, and her eye aligned perfectly with the scope. She understood that success required more than training. It required patience, calmness, and focus. Unlike the others, who had let their frustration and the pressure of the general's eyes get to them, she controlled herself completely. Around her, the soldiers exchanged nervous glances. Some of them could barely watch, feeling the weight of the impossibility of the shot. Others leaned forward slightly, curiosity mixed with disbelief. "Is she really going to try it?" one whispered. Another shook his head, almost unable to comprehend the situation. After 13 misses, it seemed absurd that someone, especially someone with no reputation as a sharpshooter, could even hope to succeed. But she didn't think about their doubts. She didn't think about the whispers or the skepticism. All that existed for her in that moment was the rifle, the scope, and the distant target. She calculated, adjusted, and recalibrated. Every detail of the shot had to be considered. The slight curve of the earth over such a long distance, the changes in air pressure, the temperature, the faint gusts of wind. She knew that even the smallest error could mean failure, but she welcomed the challenge. The general watched closely, his eyes narrowing in concentration. He could see the methodical way she worked, the precision in every movement. Unlike the others, who had been hurried and tense, she radiated calmness. There was something about her approach that suggested more than talent. It suggested experience, intuition, and a deep understanding of marksmanship that came from practice, not just training manuals. She paused for a moment, scanning the landscape. The target seemed impossibly small from this distance, barely a dot against the horizon, but she didn't hesitate. Her mind worked quickly, calculating every factor that could affect the bullet's path. She adjusted her grip, aligned her shoulders, and steadied her breathing. She knew that control of her body was just as important as control of her weapon. Even the slightest twitch or unnecessary movement could ruin the shot. The soldiers around her began to feel a shift in the air. The tension was no longer just about doubt or fear. It had turned into anticipation. They could sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Even the ones who had mocked her earlier were now watching in silent awe. There was a strange energy in the air, a mixture of disbelief, hope, and excitement. For the first time, they wondered if she might actually succeed. She took another deep breath, letting her body relax completely. Her focus was absolute. The distant target, 4,000 meters away, seemed daunting, almost impossible. But she did not see it that way. To her, it was simply the next challenge to master, a problem to solve with patience, skill, and concentration. She adjusted her aim one last time, her finger hovering lightly near the trigger, ready to release the shot when everything was perfectly aligned. The general's heart pounded as he watched her. This was a critical moment. If she succeeded, it would be a demonstration of skill and composure beyond what even he had witnessed in years of military experience. If she failed, it would still be impressive that she dared to try. But somehow, even in his decades of service, he could feel that this shot might change everything. The soldiers held their breath. The wind whispered across the range, carrying dust and the faint scent of gunpowder. Silence fell like a heavy blanket over the entire training ground. All eyes were on her. She was calm, focused, and ready. A stark contrast to the tension and nervous energy that had dominated the morning. It was more than just a shot. It was a test of nerves, calculation, and precision. Every movement, every adjustment, and every breath counted. And in that quiet moment, as she prepared, the simple, unassuming woman showed everyone present that skill, patience, and focus could overcome doubt and skepticism. She was about to attempt something extraordinary, something that no one had managed before, and the anticipation was almost unbearable. The moment had finally come. After careful preparation, steady breathing, and meticulous adjustments, the woman was ready. The air around the range felt almost electric. Soldiers who had been whispering, laughing, or shaking their heads in disbelief were now completely silent, their eyes fixed on her every movement. Even the general, who had spent decades witnessing remarkable feats, felt a rare twinge of anticipation. 13 misses had already filled the morning with frustration. And now, this quiet, unassuming woman was about to attempt the impossible. She looked through the scope, her eye perfectly aligned with the tiny distant target 4,000 meters away. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a dot, almost invisible, but she saw it clearly. Her mind raced through every factor she had considered: the wind, the distance, the slight curvature of the earth, even the subtle shifts in air pressure. Her body was steady, her hands unwavering, and her finger rested lightly on the trigger. She didn't hurry, didn't panic, and didn't allow the pressure of everyone watching to distract her. The soldiers around her exchanged nervous glances. Some could barely watch, their anxiety mirrored in their clenched fists or rigid postures. Others leaned forward slightly, unable to resist the curiosity that had replaced their earlier skepticism. The general held his breath, his eyes narrowing as he followed every subtle movement. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed. The world had narrowed to just the rifle, the scope, the woman, and the distant target. She took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the calm focus settle over her like a shield. The wind rustled the grass, the sun glinted off the rifles lined up on the range, and the distant hum of anticipation seemed almost tangible. All the noise of doubt, fear, and previous failures faded away. This was her moment, and she was ready to meet it with skill, patience, and quiet determination. With another precise adjustment, she aligned the crosshairs perfectly on the target. Every calculation she had made in her mind came together in that single point of focus. Her finger tightened gently on the trigger, and with a soft, controlled squeeze, the bullet left the rifle. The soldiers froze. Time seemed to hang in the air as everyone watched the projectile disappear into the distance. Eyes followed it through the scope, through binoculars, and even without equipment, the tension was impossible to ignore. The first shot had been fired, and none of them could believe what might happen next. The silence was so heavy that it felt almost physical, pressing down on everyone present. Then came the result. The bullet struck the target almost perfectly. A small cheer escaped from someone in the back, quickly stifled as everyone tried to process what they had just seen. The general's eyes widened, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. 13 experienced soldiers had failed, and yet here was someone who had been dismissed as ordinary, executing a shot that seemed impossible. The soldiers around her couldn't hide their astonishment. Whispers of shock and admiration spread like wildfire. "Did she just?" one muttered, barely finishing the sentence. Another shook his head, unable to comprehend what he had witnessed. Even those who had doubted her skill were now forced to reconsider. She wasn't just lucky. She was precise, calm, and extraordinarily skilled. The woman didn't react outwardly. She didn't celebrate or boast. Instead, she calmly readjusted her position, checking her scope and rifle once more. She knew the first shot had been excellent, but there was no room for error if she wanted complete certainty. Her focus remained unbroken, her composure unshaken. The general stepped closer, his eyes fixed on her as he studied every subtle motion. There was a mixture of awe and respect in his gaze. He had asked if there were any sharpshooters present, and this quiet, underestimated woman had just answered in a way he had never imagined. He realized that her success was not just skill. It was her mindset, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and her meticulous preparation that had made this extraordinary shot possible. The soldiers began to relax slightly, but the tension was far from gone. Everyone knew that one shot could be an accident. The real test would come with confirmation, a second shot, a demonstration that her skill was real, repeatable, and not a fluke. The woman adjusted her aim again, aligning the crosshairs carefully, her body steady and controlled. Every small movement was precise, calculated, and deliberate. She took another deep breath and squeezed the trigger again. The second bullet flew through the air, tracing a perfect path to the distant target. This time, it hit dead center, a perfect mark that left no room for doubt. Gasps and murmurs of awe rippled through the soldiers. The impossible had been achieved. The ordinary had become extraordinary. The general's jaw tightened, his eyes reflecting both pride and astonishment. He stepped forward, clapping his hands slowly in recognition, the sound echoing across the range. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. The soldiers now watched with wide eyes, some still shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling in admiration. She lowered her rifle, her face calm, her posture unchanged. There was no fanfare, no boasting, just quiet confidence. Yet in that moment, everyone knew they had witnessed something remarkable. The woman had not only achieved the impossible but had done so with grace, focus, and skill that far exceeded expectations. The training ground, once filled with frustration and doubt, was now filled with a newfound respect and inspiration. This single moment would be remembered by everyone present. It wasn't just a successful shot. It was proof that determination, focus, and skill could overcome any skepticism, challenge, or expectation. The simple, quiet woman had changed the way everyone viewed possibility that day, proving that greatness often comes from unexpected places, and that underestimating someone based on appearances can be a costly mistake. The moment after her second perfect shot hung in the air like a breath caught between disbelief and awe. The soldiers who had doubted her now stared in silence, mouths slightly open, eyes wide with astonishment. Even the general, who had seen countless remarkable feats in his career, struggled to find words. He had asked if there were any sharpshooters present, fully expecting silence, disappointment, or failure, but instead, he had been proven spectacularly wrong. The woman lowered her rifle slowly, her face calm, her movements precise. There was no smile of triumph, no boastful gesture. She simply remained composed, as if her success was routine, as if hitting an impossible target was merely a matter of careful preparation and focus. Yet, for those who watched, it was nothing short of miraculous. The range that had been filled with tension, frustration, and skepticism just moments ago now buzzed with astonishment. Every soldier who had doubted her skill was forced to confront a simple truth. They had underestimated her completely. The general finally stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel of the firing range. He approached her slowly, studying every detail, the way she held herself, the careful way she adjusted the rifle, the steady calm in her eyes. For decades, he had trained soldiers, evaluated sharpshooters, and witnessed extraordinary skill, but this was different. This was not just skill. It was a combination of precision, patience, and confidence under extreme pressure. And it had come from someone he, and nearly everyone else, had overlooked. "Unbelievable," he said quietly, almost to himself, as he circled her to get a closer look. His voice, carrying both respect and amazement, reached the soldiers who were now standing silently, unsure whether to cheer or simply remain frozen in awe. This was a lesson they would never forget. Sometimes, the most extraordinary talent comes from the most unexpected place. The soldiers' reactions were mixed. Some whispered apologies to themselves for ever doubting her. Others shook their heads in wonder, unable to comprehend the accuracy of the shots. A few younger soldiers even took a step forward, wanting to study her technique, to understand how someone so ordinary could perform at a level that had eluded the best-trained sharpshooters. Their eyes followed her every motion, noticing details they hadn't seen before. The steadiness of her hands, the careful alignment of her scope, the relaxed yet focused way she controlled her breathing. The woman remained quiet, letting the moment settle. She knew the significance of what she had just done, but she also understood that skill alone was not enough. She needed to maintain composure, to show that this was not a fluke. She readjusted the rifle, checking the alignment one more time. Her movements were methodical, controlled, and deliberate, reinforcing the truth that precision under pressure comes from preparation and focus, not luck. The general watched her closely, a growing respect in his eyes. He realized that this quiet, unassuming soldier had not only completed an impossible task, but had also taught a powerful lesson in humility and focus. He could see the determination in her posture, the calm intelligence in her gaze. This was someone who commanded attention, not through words or rank, but through undeniable skill and quiet confidence. "Step back," he instructed, motioning for the other soldiers to give her space. "Let her demonstrate again," he said, his voice now carrying authority tinged with admiration. The soldiers obeyed, their skepticism replaced by curiosity and anticipation. If her previous shots were extraordinary, what would she do next? Could she continue to perform at this impossible level? She prepared for another attempt, repeating the careful process she had used before, aligning the scope, checking the rifle, measuring the wind, adjusting for distance and environmental factors. She moved with a precision that was almost mechanical yet completely natural. Every movement demonstrated not just skill, but an understanding of the deeper principles of marksmanship. She was a master of her craft, and her confidence under pressure radiated outward, influencing everyone who watched. As she took aim and fired again, the bullet flew across the range, tracing a perfect trajectory to the distant target. It struck the mark dead center. Gasps and murmurs spread across the soldiers. Some clapped quietly, unable to contain their admiration, while others simply stared, too stunned to react. The general allowed himself a small, proud smile. He had witnessed greatness, and he knew that this woman had earned his full respect. Her repeated success shattered any remaining doubts. The soldiers now saw her not as a simple woman, but as one of the army's most extraordinary sharpshooters. She had earned their admiration through action, not words. The general stepped closer, extending his hand in a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. The soldiers began to murmur among themselves, some clapping, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief. This was more than just a demonstration of skill. It was a lesson in humility, focus, and the power of quiet determination. The general realized that this moment would be remembered for years, not only as a record of marksmanship but as a story of unexpected talent overcoming doubt and skepticism. The woman had proven that appearances could be deceiving, that true skill often comes from dedication, preparation, and calm confidence. By the end of the demonstration, everyone on the range understood one thing clearly. She was extraordinary. The simple, quiet woman, underestimated and overlooked, had become the hero of the day. Her performance had earned her not only recognition but also respect, inspiring every soldier present to reconsider what was possible and to understand that greatness often comes from the most unexpected places. After her third perfect shot, the entire training ground seemed to hold its breath. The tension that had dominated the morning had been replaced by awe and admiration. Soldiers who had earlier mocked her now looked on with respect, their skepticism replaced by astonishment. Even those who had doubted her skill could not hide the realization that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The simple, unassuming woman, previously overlooked and underestimated, had proven herself beyond all doubt. The general stepped forward, his eyes studying her carefully. He had asked if there were any sharpshooters, expecting silence or failure. Instead, he had been presented with a display of skill that was nothing short of remarkable. He could see the confidence in her posture, the calm precision in her movements, and the quiet determination in her eyes. This was a soldier who had earned respect not by rank or reputation, but through undeniable ability and composure under pressure. He reached out to her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. His voice, steady but filled with genuine admiration, broke the silence. "You've done what no one else could. Your skill is extraordinary. Well done." The soldiers around them paused, watching this rare moment of recognition. For them, it was more than just praise. It was validation that someone they had underestimated was truly exceptional. The murmurs of the soldiers grew louder, now filled with admiration rather than doubt. "She did it. She really did it," one whispered. Another shook his head, as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. A few soldiers even stepped forward, offering their own congratulations. It was an unusual scene for the training ground, where competitiveness and pride often dominated interactions. Yet in this moment, genuine respect and recognition filled the air. The woman remained calm, accepting the praise with quiet dignity. She did not boast, did not seek attention, and did not allow her success to inflate her ego. Her focus had never been on recognition, but on precision, preparation, and skill. Yet, in the faces of the soldiers and the general, she could see the impact of her achievement. She had not only hit the target but had also shattered assumptions, proving that determination and skill could overcome doubt and skepticism. The general continued to speak, now addressing the entire group. "Let this be a lesson to all of us," he said, his voice carrying authority and inspiration. "Skill and dedication are not always obvious at first glance. Today, we have seen that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. Never underestimate anyone, and always respect the effort and focus that each soldier brings." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement. The soldiers had learned something that could not be taught through drills or manuals. It was a lesson in humility, recognition, and the true meaning of skill. Some of the younger soldiers approached her, asking questions about her technique, curious to understand how she had achieved the impossible. She answered them calmly, explaining her focus on patience, careful calculation, and control of breathing. Her responses were simple yet profound, emphasizing the importance of preparation, observation, and mental clarity. The soldiers listened intently, realizing that her success was not just talent, but a combination of dedication, focus, and methodical practice. As the morning sun climbed higher, the general called for everyone to gather. He made a point of highlighting her achievement, praising her publicly in front of the entire unit. It was a rare moment of acknowledgement, and the soldiers responded with applause and cheers. Even those who had mocked her earlier now looked at her with admiration, understanding that she had earned her place as one of the Army's finest sharpshooters. Her success began to spread beyond the training range. Word of her incredible marksmanship reached other units, inspiring soldiers who had once doubted themselves or others. Her story became an example of how focus, patience, and calm determination could overcome even the most daunting challenges. She had become a symbol of excellence, humility, and quiet strength, someone who proved that true skill often lies hidden beneath a modest exterior. The general himself felt a deep sense of pride. Not only had he witnessed an extraordinary display of marksmanship, but he had also observed a powerful lesson in leadership and recognition. He realized that greatness could be nurtured in unexpected ways, and that every soldier deserved to be seen and acknowledged for their potential. The woman's achievement had changed the atmosphere of the unit, fostering respect, unity, and inspiration. By the end of the day, the soldiers had internalized the lesson she had provided. Her repeated success, her calm demeanor, and her dedication had earned her not only recognition but genuine respect. She had transformed from a quiet, overlooked member of the unit into a symbol of excellence and inspiration. Her story was now one that would be shared among soldiers for years to come. A reminder that skill, focus, and determination could turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. In that moment, standing among her peers and under the approving gaze of the general, she understood the true power of her actions. She had not only achieved what seemed impossible but had also changed the perception of everyone around her. The soldiers now saw her not as a simple woman, but as a remarkable sharpshooter, a professional, and an example of what dedication, focus, and calm under pressure could achieve. The day had turned into something no one at the training ground would ever forget. The quiet, unassuming woman, who had spent most of her time maintaining equipment and helping her fellow soldiers, had transformed the atmosphere completely. What had begun as skepticism, doubt, and even ridicule had turned into respect, admiration, and inspiration. Her calm focus, precise skill, and unwavering determination had shown everyone what true greatness could look like, even when it came from unexpected places. As the soldiers packed up their rifles and gear, many of them still glanced at her with awe. They whispered among themselves, amazed at what they had witnessed. Some shook their heads, trying to comprehend the impossible. A target 4,000 meters away, hit perfectly not once, but multiple times, by someone they had assumed was ordinary. The lesson had sunk deep. Never judge someone by appearances alone. Talent and determination often lie hidden where you least expect it. The general, standing a few steps away, watched her quietly. His mind was filled with both pride and reflection. He had asked a simple question that morning, "Any sharpshooters here?" He had not expected an answer that would challenge everything he thought he knew. Yet here she was, answering without words, demonstrating precision, courage, and focus in a way that left everyone speechless. He realized that the event had more value than just testing skill. It had become a lesson in leadership, recognition, and humility. He approached her once more, this time with a more formal tone. "Your skill and composure today have set a new standard," he said, his voice steady but filled with genuine respect. You've shown everyone that greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it quietly waits for the right moment to prove its worth. Well done. Her response was simple. A calm nod, a small smile, and a quiet acknowledgement that spoke volumes more than words ever could. Around her, the soldiers began to reflect on their own assumptions and biases. Many of them had doubted her simply because she didn't fit the image of a sharpshooter. She hadn't carried medals or a history of battlefield glory. She had been ordinary in their eyes, someone who cleaned rifles, handled maintenance, and stayed out of the spotlight. Yet, her extraordinary skill and calm determination had completely overturned those assumptions. It was a humbling reminder that potential cannot always be measured by appearances, and that every individual has unique abilities that can shine when given the chance. The impact of her performance extended beyond the training ground. Word spread quickly throughout the base and even to other units. Soldiers spoke of her remarkable marksmanship, her patience, and her composure under pressure. She became a symbol of what could be achieved through focus, preparation, and quiet confidence. Younger recruits, in particular, were inspired by her story. They realized that it wasn't always rank, fame, or outward confidence that led to success. Sometimes it was determination, preparation, and believing in oneself that made the difference. She also began to mentor some of the soldiers who had been curious about her technique. They asked her how she had been able to make such perfect calculations, how she stayed calm under pressure, and how she maintained focus when the stakes were so high. Her advice was simple but profound. Patience, careful observation, control of your breathing, and attention to every detail. Rushing never works, she told them quietly. And confidence comes from preparation, not from showing off. The soldiers listened closely, realizing that these were lessons that applied not just to shooting, but to life and leadership. The general continued to highlight her accomplishment in official meetings and briefings, using her as an example of excellence that could inspire the entire army. He emphasized that her performance demonstrated the power of calmness, preparation, and quiet skill. She had taught everyone a vital lesson. True talent often remains unnoticed until it is given the opportunity to shine. And when it does, it can inspire not only admiration, but also growth, humility, and respect in others. As the day ended and the sun began to lower toward the horizon, the training ground returned to its usual rhythm. Soldiers continued their drills, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a new sense of possibility, a reminder that no challenge was too great when approached with focus, determination, and patience. And somewhere in the back of every soldier's mind, the story of the simple woman who had nailed a target 4,000 meters away lingered, a story of courage, skill, and unexpected greatness. For her part, she remained humble. She returned to her duties, continuing to maintain equipment and assist her fellow soldiers. But the respect she had earned followed her wherever she went. She became a quiet hero, someone whose actions spoke louder than words, and whose legacy inspired everyone around her to strive for excellence, even when no one was watching. By the end of the day, it was clear that her story would be told for years to come. She had not only accomplished an extraordinary feat, but she had also changed the way her peers thought about ability, focus, and potential. She had proven that greatness is not always loud, flashy, or obvious. Sometimes, it is quiet, steady, and waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And when it does, it leaves a lasting impact that inspires everyone who witnesses it. In the end, the simple woman had achieved more than just a perfect mark on a distant target. She had earned respect, admiration, and a place in the hearts of her fellow soldiers as a true example of excellence, proving that determination, skill, and quiet confidence can make the impossible possible.